Welcome back, Endgame. It's Chris, and I'm going to bring you some of my favorite buy low wide receivers headed into Week 8. All right, let's start with a guy who's one of my favorite wide receivers to draft, and I'm still super high on him, and that is CeeDee Lamb. Coming off a down game in a spot everybody thought he would smash, going up against the Lions, but it didn't happen. But when you look at the numbers, you understand why it didn't happen. Dak Prescott only threw the ball 25 times in this game. That was probably a combination of one, coming back from injury, and two, the Cowboys didn't need to throw. The Lions offense could not do anything. They couldn't put points on the board. The Cowboys just were able to run the ball, didn't have to throw, didn't have to hurry it up. They won this game easily, and the Lions put up no fight on offense. So because of that, only 25 attempts. But CeeDee Lamb still had a 24% target share. Any wide receiver getting that level of a target share on a team that actually throws the ball, so not the Falcons, will be more than fantasy relevant. They will be great. Because when Dak throws the ball 30, 35, 40 times, which will happen, CeeDee Lamb is going to get double-digit targets and have huge fantasy games. And the other thing I really like about CeeDee Lamb, especially with Michael Gallup back, is he plays the majority of his snaps out of the slot. He gets those weaker matchups against a slot corner, which is typically the weaker corners on most teams. He gets mismatches week in and week out. So as they start throwing more, as they ramp it up with Dak, as they play teams who can actually put points on the board and force them to throw, CeeDee Lamb will absolutely crush down the stretch. I think he still has top 10 upside, maybe even top 5 upside, but you're not going to have to give up a player like that to get CeeDee Lamb. So go out and trade for him now while his value is still low. Now a player who I wasn't really high on during the draft process, but his value has sunk so much, I'm kind of starting to buy into him, is Deebo Samuel. People thought when they drafted Deebo Samuel, they were getting this league-winning, top 5 type wide receiver, and it just hasn't happened this year. And look, it's not going to happen. It just isn't. This offense, George Kittle is healthy. Ayuk is more involved. Now they have Christian McCaffrey there. Like, Deebo Samuel's value definitely is not what it was during the draft season or last season, not even close. But that's why you can take advantage of it, because if you understand that, the player who has Deebo Samuel probably doesn't understand that, because they drafted Deebo Samuel to be a top 5 wide receiver, and now they view him as a bust for their fantasy team. They don't understand that, okay, maybe now I just have a guy who's a high upside wide receiver too that I just play every week. Because look, the thing about Deebo Samuel is he doesn't need 10 plus targets. We know he can take any pass to the house at any time. Huge play ability. So yes, his value is definitely down in fantasy, and it will be down in fantasy. But if you can get him at a discount, it's still worth it. He's still a great player to have week in and week out in your lineup. So go out. Maybe the Deebo Samuel owner in your league is panicking. See if you can get him at a discount. Now, another guy I was high on, and I'm still high on, is Courtland Sutton. But a lot of people aren't high on Courtland Sutton. Because why? Number one, it was Brett Rypien last week, and I told everybody who asked me not to start Courtland Sutton last week. Unless your options, were Courtland Sutton or Kadarius Toney, I pretty much told you don't start Courtland Sutton because I knew it was going to be terrible with Brett Rypien. But Russ is still the long-term quarterback. Russ will still be the quarterback. Will it be in Week 8? We don't know yet. But even if it's not in Week 8, even if it's not until after the bye, that is okay. Because for as bad as Russell Wilson has been, one thing he still does is chuck the ball down the field. Russ does not like to throw it short. This is why Sutton has been so much better than Jeudy this year. And Courtland Sutton has been great in games with Russell Wilson. He has double-digit PPR points in every game but one with Russell Wilson. And it wasn't like Russell Wilson was tearing it up all season and then got bad. Russell Wilson has been terrible all season, and Courtland Sutton has still been great. So if people are panicking about Russell Wilson, thinking, oh my gosh, he's terrible, he's going to be a bust this year, it doesn't matter for Courtland Sutton because Courtland Sutton's played with the bust Russ all year and been just fine. So go out, trade for Sutton now. Yeah, you might have to sit through another week of Brett Rypien and put Courtland Sutton on your bench, but when they come back from the bye, almost certainly Russell Wilson will be the starter, and Sutton will once again be a high upside every week wide receiver 2 that you have to have in your lineup. So Sutton's a guy you could trade for with upside. Here's a guy you could trade for if you're just looking for somebody who you know will give you solid fantasy production week in and week out, and that is Chris Godwin. And again, kind of like Sutton, people are freaking out about the Bucs offense and Tom Brady, and rightfully so. Tom Brady and the Bucs offense looks completely broken right now, but it doesn't matter for Chris Godwin because Chris Godwin's role is fine no matter what because he takes the short routes, the easy throws. Yes, he doesn't have the upside of Mike Evans because he's not going to get the down the field throws, and we know Evans going to get more of the red zone, end zone type of work. But Chris Godwin is one of those guys that's going to get you double-digit PPR points almost every single week, has an extremely high floor, almost will never bust for your team, almost never will let you down, outside of injury, of course. And he's not going to take much to get it all right now because people are panicking about the offense, and he's coming off somewhat of a down game. So if you're looking for a wide receiver who you can just put in your lineup, feel great about, not worry about, you don't need tons of upside, maybe you already have a lot of upside in your team, Chris Godwin is a great receiver to go trade for. So we went from an upside wide receiver to a floor wide receiver. Now I'm going to talk about Devonta Smith, who gives you a high floor and a ton of upside, and nobody seems to care. Nobody likes Devonta Smith. Why don't you like Devonta Smith? What is wrong with Devonta Smith? He's an elite wide receiver. He's a talented wide receiver, and he's been great in fantasy this year. Not good, he's been great. If you exclude week 1 when the Eagles were obviously trying to show off their new toy in A.J. Brown, they force-fed him like 13 targets that game. And if you exclude that terrible weather game where it was freezing cold, Devonta Smith has scored 15 or more PPR points in every single game this year. And he has massive upside to go with that high floor. And people look at him like, should I start Devonta Smith? Is he okay this week? What's the matchup like? It doesn't matter. Devonta Smith is a stud, and he's a guy you put in your lineup every single week because, again, he has a very high floor with a high ceiling. But people don't treat him like that. They treat him like this, kind of borderline starting wide receiver. They're not really sure about it. He's in a great situation. He's got Jalen Hurts. He's got A.J. Brown there to take the top corner away from him. There's nothing not to like about Devonta Smith, but people find many reasons not to like Devonta Smith. So go get him right now, coming out of the bye before he goes off in week 8, and people start to realize maybe this guy needs to be in my lineup every week. Now is the time to get him. And then finally, I'm going to end with one of the biggest busts of 2022. That's Elijah Moore. And no, this isn't me, clinging to hope for Elijah Moore. That hope is gone. But there is potential for the situation to change. And when the risk for getting Elijah Moore is extremely low and the reward is extremely high, you've got to do it. Because right now, you can give up almost nothing to get Elijah Moore. In fact, he was dropped in a lot of leagues. He might just be sitting on your waiver wire. But if somebody in your league still has Elijah Moore, they don't need Elijah Moore. He's not getting them anything. Even when he plays, he's not scoring any points. And last week, he wasn't even active, and he's demanding a trade. They will give you Elijah Moore for a warm body who actually scores fantasy points, somebody you don't even need. And here's the potential for Elijah Moore. Here's the reward if it pans out. Number 1, he's asking for a trade. Now, the Jets say they're not going to trade him, but we've heard lots of teams say we're not going to trade a player, and then they trade the player. And if they do trade him, he's likely going to a better situation because almost any situation would be better for Elijah Moore. So you could potentially have a great wide receiver get traded to a better situation who you got for almost no risk. The other possibility here is the Jets just start using him more because the Jets actually need him now. Because number 1, Breece Hall just tore his ACL. Sad, but it happened. They're not going to just be able to be a team that just relies on the running game because Michael Carter, he's nice, but he's not Breece Hall. He can't overcome, a bad O-line and a bad situation like Breece Hall can. And number 2, Corey Davis just injured his MCL, and Denzel Mims, who they used to replace Elijah Moore on Sunday, is not the answer. They need Elijah Moore. They need to use this guy. He's good. He's got talent. He can help this team. So there are 2 paths here for Elijah Moore, a trade or the Jets realizing they need to use him more. Either of those are worth the incredibly low risk it's going to take to get Elijah Moore. So go look on your bench, find somebody who's scoring a decent amount of points who you will never, ever start, trade them for Elijah Moore. and wait and see what happens. Worst case, you just drop Elijah Moore. All right, now you know some of my buy low wide receivers, and you know who I like at running back, who to start, who to sit, who kaboom, everything you need to help you dominate and win your Week 8 matchup. We got you covered. Check out our Week 8 playlist right here.